using some technology in the class. If you want to pick up a copy of the syllabus and an index card. I'm going to be doing Smartboard, so I'll have notes on the Smartboard that will add information, will work problems and stuff like that on the Smartboard, and I'll save it. I'm also recording the sessions, so you'll be able to pick up later on. I do have a YouTube channel set up, but I don't have it active yet because I've got to get the software so I can do actually the rendering of what we're going to do. It'll have our voice and all the questions and things like that, so you'll be able to pick up information. If you pick up a syllabus and an index card there. Plus it'll have all of the notes that are here on the board as well as everything that I do on the Smartboard. So you'll be able to pick that up and later on get that information on hand. Okay. Now that you sat down, if you want to pick up a copy of the syllabus and index card. So anyway, so I'm Ron Alford. This is my email address. It's also in your syllabus. Here is my phone number. You can leave me a message on it if you have any questions, and I'll get back with you throughout the course. Just a couple of things I threw up here. I like to hike 14ers. This is my daughter, my second daughter. I have 5 children, so this is my second. This is the top of Longs Peak, which is outside or west of Longmont. They didn't tell me that it was the worst 14er to start on. It was my very first one. We left the entrance at midnight and crested about 8 o'clock and then took all this to about 4 o'clock the next day to get back to our car. So it was a long trip. And of course, not being familiar, I had everything I thought I would ever need, including almost a refrigerator, it felt like. That was a lot of extra weight to carry around, so not fun. But this weekend, if I live to tell about it, I'm going to be hiking at Pikes Peak. Not driving up to the top and then going into the gift center if you've been down to Pikes Peak, but actually hiking that with my kids, so I'm looking forward to that. I also like motorcycles, so my wife and I annually go through and do a gift ride for kids at the Children's Hospital. If you'll pick up a copy of the syllabus, the index card. So I'd like to do that, so that's a lot of fun for us as well. So that's a little bit about me. We'll talk more about that as we go. I'm going to see how this technology works here. Come on. Well, not the way it's supposed to, I thought. Well, let's see. Supposed to be able to swipe. Okay. So who am I? I've talked a little bit about, I'm an Air Force veteran. I was in the Air Force quite a while. I recently retired from a career in aerospace defense industry. I've started my own consulting business, so I do that in my spare time. And as I talked about, I enjoy hiking 14ers, riding motorcycles. I enjoy working out. Playing with my grandkids. I have 2, 1 3 and 1 1, and so they're a lot of fun. And teaching. I enjoy teaching as well. Hopefully you'll see that as we go through the class. So I want to let you know that I've been where you are. I have been various times where I was working overtime. If you pick up a copy of the syllabus and index card, please. I was taking college courses, even some that I didn't like, but I had to take as well because they were required for my curriculum. If you'll pick up a copy of the syllabus and the index card, please. While I was working overtime, while I was also teaching some college classes, and I was also being a dad. So I know what it's like to have not very much time to try to have a life and do all those other things. So I've been there with you, and so I have that experience. Hopefully we'll make the class more fun because of what I know is involved with that. I want to let you know that if you haven't had any math really can be fun. I certainly think it's a lot of fun. Not that I sit around in my evening hours going through and working a lot of math problems just because I enjoy doing that. But it is a subject that I think you'll see, hopefully as we go through the course, has a lot of practical merit. If you pick up a copy of the syllabus and the index card there, please. Okay. So my goal is to make it practical for you. We'll talk about some of the things that in our subject areas where it's relevant to the things that you may be doing or you may be involved with at some point in your life. So that's one of my goals to do that. So hopefully it's practical. I believe that everybody here is in a liberal arts major. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, so you're not going into the sciences or any STEM education. So, but even so, you think you can avoid some of the technical things. I think you'll find out that they really are going to be pretty prevalent. If you pick up a copy of those 2 items there at the back. Okay. So I'm going to share my secret with you, okay, for how to get by in this class. And we're going to see if my technology works there. Okay. Pause. By the way, that's a wolf paw. I thought I'd be clever since that's the mascot for the school. Okay.
Good one.
So pause, if you pick up a copy of the two things there, please. Pause is my secret. Okay, you're probably wondering, well, what's pause? Well, the first thing is participation. You know, obviously, we're going to be going through material, and it'd be worthwhile for you to ask questions. I want you to feel free to ask questions. There are no stupid questions. I know there are a lot of times I've had that experience where I sit there in class and somebody's talking about something and it just doesn't quite ring right, or I'm not quite getting it. Don't be afraid to ask a question, okay? That's going to be really important because that's something that helps us all learn. And by the way, your questions will be recorded too. I don't mean that to scare you, but that'll help you when you go back and listen to the notes, if you do, to really pick up some of those things and concepts that were said. Attendance. Attendance is obviously important. I am going to be taking attendance. And with that said, I gave, you should be all picked up an index card. So here's the mystery behind the index card. What I'd like you to do is put your name on it, your first and last name, and the first name being the one that you like to be called, okay? Like your first name may be Reginald, but you want to be called Ron. Okay, my first name isn't Reginald. Okay. And then I'd like you to put down something that's not private, but something that's interesting about yourself, okay? Like you like 14ers, or you like motorcycles, or you like hot rods. So I'd like you to do that. And here's what we're going to do with this. This is going to be our attendance. I'm going to collect this at the end of class from you. Okay, that'll let me know that you were here for class. And then I'm going to pass it out at the beginning of every class. And that's going to help me learn your names. Okay? I tell you, I'm a slow learner when it comes to names, so you'll have to bear with me. But this is going to help me as I pass this out at the beginning of class. So, first name that you'd like to be called, your nickname if you will, and last name, and then something that's interesting about you. Again, nothing private. I don't want any private information.
My social is
Yeah. Social, date of birth, address, income if you have something. Okay. Homework. Homework is going to be important too, because that's a way to practice and pick up things. Now, we'll talk about my math lab in a little bit. That's the material in the area where you're going to be working homework, and I think it has some great capabilities. So if you want to pick up an syllabus and an index card there, and on the index card put your nickname you like to be called, your last name, and something that you think is interesting about you but not private. Okay? All right, so homework is going to be important to do. We'll talk about it in class if you have questions, but it's going to be a good practice for you and a good way to learn. You can pick up a copy of the syllabus and index card. Syllabus and index card. One thing you'll find about me is I'm going to start punctually at the top of the hour, and oh, by the way, we're going to go to the end of the class. Okay, so we're not going to be leaving early out of class. Okay. All right, and then so you got the P, the A, the W, and then staying focused. Okay. Math is fun, but you have to look at it. You have to be able to work through it. There's going to be a lot of things that could be distracting during class, during the time you're working on your homework at home. But if you can dedicate your time to that, I think you'll find out that it's going to work out pretty well for you. Okay. So that's my secret to you for success in the class. All right. All right, so I told you about the index card. You take your name, I'll put your name on it. We're going to add one thing that's interesting. Again, nothing private. I'm going to pass it out at the beginning of class so I can get familiarity with your names. And then I'll pick it up at the end of every class. Okay. So for those of you who came in late, if you'll do that, I appreciate it. And again, I think we've pretty much got everybody in now. I'm recording these classes, so you'll be able to pick them up. I'll let everybody know when they're out on YouTube for you to go out. It'll have everything that's on this board plus a recording of all the things that go on from an audio perspective. So you'll be able to pick up later if you want to read, learn, or go back through. If you don't really take notes well or whatever, you can do that offline. My goal is to have those first class up by the end of this week. I just have to get all the other software in place. Okay, so we got a couple of charts from a housekeeping perspective for you. I'm going to drop the lowest quiz score at the end of the semester. Okay, so you're going to take a number of quizzes through the course of the semester. Those are going to be online quizzes through my math lab. I'll drop the lowest quiz score. I also replaced the lowest exam score. You're going to have 4 exams. They're in the syllabus, and we'll talk a little bit about the schedule later on. With the final exam score, if it's going to help your grade. Okay, so it's not like all is lost if you have a tough time. From a MyMathLab perspective, that's going to be our tool. If you pick up syllabus and index card, please. MyMathLab, you have a 2-week grace period from your first login to enter a permanent code. I guess there's a couple different ways you can go about this. If you've activated a grace period, okay, then you have to wait till the end of that grace period to actually get your permanent login. If you don't go to the grace period, then you can go directly to the permanent login. And you can get a working MyLabs Plus card or code by either going to the Buy Now link off the Front Range Community Central Community College link, or go into the bookstore. Okay. Any questions on those? Right.
Do you know what the price is on those?
I think it's $100. Yeah, $100
For the code anyway.
for the code.
Sorry.
And if you buy the code and you get the MyMathLab, it comes with the online book. Okay, so you don't have to buy a hard copy of the book. I mean, you can if you like the feel of paper. If you pick up the syllabus and index card. If you like the feel of paper or heavy weight, then you can certainly do that too. But you have to have the MyMathLab because that's the way we're going to be doing work. Okay. All right. Now, with the Colorado Community College system and Front Range, we require that all of the correspondence that we deal with is through your Front Range email system. Okay, so not your personal email. I'm not going to give you my personal and my work emails or anything else like that. You've got my email on the syllabus as well as in these notes that you pick up later. Okay? So don't use personal email accounts. I think there's also a way inside of Desire to Learn, if you've used Desire to Learn, to be able to message internally. Okay, so those are also permissible. August 30th is the single payer or payment deadline and the drop date for this 15-week class. Okay, so remember August 30th, because you're not going to be able to add a class back in if you miss that date. Okay. And as I indicated earlier, I'm going to be recording. I don't know what I could do with this. I'll be recording the classes, so you should be able to get the material with our dialogue and the notes on the smart screen. And I think that'll be a good aid for you and be able to pick those up. And that should be active by the end of this week. I'll send out a note when we get that up and running. Okay, it'll be a YouTube channel. Okay, note cards are not going to be allowed on any exam except for the final. Okay, if you want to pick up the syllabus and index card there, please. Now you can't use a 3x5 index or a note card on the final, but you can include any worked examples, just formulas or examples or theorems. Okay. And I want your note cards turned in with your final. Now for the exams, since those are in-class exams, I will give you all the relevant formulas you need on your actual exam paperwork. Okay. So that should make it fairly straightforward for you, not having to memorize a lot of those things. Okay. Any questions on these things? Right.
Wait a minute. Okay. So on the exams that were allowed note cards, when we turn those into you, do you take those into account when you grade?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that you followed the guidelines for the note cards. I mean, they're not extra credit or anything else like that, because you're not going to have any work.
Because some teachers have, the ones that allow it, they have you turn in your note card and then they look at what you put on the note card, and based on what you put on there, they're like, oh, we'll give you like 2 points extra credit or something.
No, we're not going to do that. I mean, I'm just going to make sure that you've been adhering to the guidelines, but that's just going to be an aid for you in taking the exam, obviously. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the syllabus. So everybody should have a copy of the syllabus. Some of you have some pending changes on just because I made a little bit of a mistake, but I didn't want to pay for printing the copies over again. But so we are meeting until 9:50 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You've got my email address on the front there, as well as my phone number, my office phone number. I don't have a physical office, so this will go to voicemail, and I'll get that email, and I'll correspond with you at that point. Again, I remember we want to do that by Front Range email system. I don't have office hours, so if you need to see me, if you'd like to see me or spend some time going over something, send me an email and ask for an appointment, and I'll be glad, or you can ask me after class for an appointment, and I'll be glad to work that out with you. Okay, so from a course material perspective, calculators, okay, phone calculators and graphing calculators are not allowed for the exams. So you need a regular scientific calculator. You can, there's a recommendation here as far as the TI format. It's about $15. It's pretty user-friendly. There also is, you can rent them, I think, from the university if you'd like to do that. I'm sure you can probably do that by going through the bookstore. From an internet access, you're going to need that to be able to get the MyMathLab Plus and the Desire to Learn. And there are several lounges around. If you'll pick up a copy of the syllabus and the index card. There are several student lounges around, if you will, that have computers that you can access to be able to do that if you don't have access at home. Now, talked a little bit about the access code for MyMathLab Plus. There's one up here in the corner over here and one over there. So. Okay, so you can access it. We talked about that already. It's about $100 to get the code for MyMathLab Plus, and you can do that either through the Front Range Community College home site or through the bookstore. All right, homework and quizzes. All of the homework and all of the quizzes are online. They're all in the MyMathLab Plus. You can do all your work online. Most of it just asks you for answers, okay? So it doesn't really allow you a place to work your homework. My recommendation for you is that you print the homeworks, and we'll go through the material later on as how you do that, is you print that and you work it offline so you can have that information. And then you can enter the answer in to the MyMathLab Plus. Okay? That way you'll have a chance to read it. Keep that notebook. It'll be good for you for a number of reasons. First of all, if you have any questions, I'll be able to look and see what you were doing as to how you were getting to the answer you got if you were concerned or challenged by that. Okay? But it also will help you organize your thoughts and keep you focused, as we talked about early on. Okay. The course description, I think you all understand that this is one of the guaranteed transfer classes, so you are able to transfer this to a four-year school. There are several competencies that we're going to be achieving during the course of the semester here, and you can see those outlined. Be able to deal with set theory and logic, mathematical modeling, probability, statistics, consumer math, and a variety of other things. So again, a lot of topics that on the surface don't sound very exciting, but my goal is to help you see those in a sense that's relevant to you from a liberal arts perspective. Next couple pages talk about the topical outline. So these are the various things we're going to go through in the course of this 15 weeks. So hopefully those are pretty straightforward. So I've talked about the homework. We're skipping forward to the instructor's overview of the course, the MyMathLab homework. You're going to have homework problems, as I indicated, in the MyMathLab Plus. Okay, so I talked about printing the homework. That's something that's going to be worthwhile for you to do. Now, there are times that I understand when students get a little bit frustrated when you know you have the right answer and MyMathLab Plus is not accepting the answer. Okay, if you tried 2 or 3 times and you're not getting the answer and you're confident that you've got the right answer, don't keep going. Okay, send me an email. There's a way that you can message the instructor from inside MyMathLab Plus, so I can work with you on it. A lot of times what we find is that it'll ask you to round off to the nearest 10th, okay, and people will put in the full number without any rounding, and that's what it considers to be an error, okay? So it might be just something that simple. Okay? So if you're struggling through a problem, you're confident you got that answer, you tried to get it in a couple of times and the system's not accepting it, let me know, okay, so we can work through that. It'll be easier than getting frustrated even further. Okay, so there's 5 exams, including the final. Okay, and you can see the schedule on the last page that covers the different times for those. As I indicated, we're going to replace one of your lowest exam grade with the final exam, okay, score, assuming the final is higher than your lowest grade. Okay. Now you're going to have to take the final. You're going to have to take the exams. Those are not replaceable. Okay, and obviously we're not going to allow any cheating or anything like that. If you go to the next page, one that shows a couple of tables. These talk about the grading for the various assignments. Homework is worth 15% of the class. Quizzes are 15%. And by the way, on MyMathLab Plus, you get to take a quiz twice. Okay? So if you do it the first time, you don't like your score, you can take it again, and it will keep the highest score for you. Okay? 4 exams, each of which is worth 12.5%, and your final, which is worth 20%. Right? The exams and the final are not in MyMathLab. We're going to do those in class as regular paper exams. 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89 is a B, etc. Okay? And there are not going to be any makeup exams allowed. All right? So once I return the exam to the class, you're not going to be able to take that. If you have an issue, and I know issues come up, if you have an issue that's going to prevent you from being able to take the exam on the schedule, please contact me in advance so we can work through that and figure out the time that works, that meets the intent of the system. Okay? And there's no extra credit in the class. Okay? Any questions on any of this so far? Okay. Attendance is important, as I indicated. It's one of my secrets to success. I will take attendance daily, and that's the purpose of the index card, being a little repetitious. Academic honesty. We talked about academic honesty a little bit. Obviously, we have a front range, a community college code of conduct, and we're going to adhere to that. So please make sure that this is your work. This is not a group of your work, that you don't get together as students and do that. Okay? And unless I agree in advance, no collaboration on any of your assignments. This is all done individually. All right, cell phones. This will probably be the one that's the most fun for cell phones. I don't know how consistent this policy is across the campus, but I'd like you to have your cell phones turned off and in your backpack. Okay, so we are not going to use that as an aid during class, certainly during exams or whatever. So if you don't have your cell phones turned off and in your backpack, please take care of that. All right. Course schedule. Obviously today is the first day of class. Labor Day weekend, that Tuesday, the 5th of September, we will not be having class. Okay? There's going to be a kind of a teacher training day. So we'll not be holding class that day, and then we'll not be having class the week of Thanksgiving. So no classes. And I've taken that into account in scheduling the homework and the due dates. The last day of the withdrawal, not that anybody's going to want to withdraw, because I know this is going to be really one of the most exciting classes you're going to have all morning at 8 o'clock, okay, is the 19th of November. And then the last day of class is December 12th. And then you can see the schedule that we show here. I'm going to do my best to adhere to the schedule, but obviously if we have challenges from a class perspective, we will work through those as we go. Any questions on the syllabus? Okay, well I have questions for you, okay, and I'm not going to ask them now, but you do have a homework assignment that's due a week from today. It's not in MyMathLab Plus, but you'll see it in Desire to Learn. There is a little syllabus hunt, it's called. It's a series of questions that I'd like you to go through, and we'll show that when we get into the Desire to Learn shell. A series of questions about the syllabus just helps make sure you go through and look at the information. And you'll turn that in on the 29th, turn it in paper, and you'll get 10 points for that. That's part of your homework assignment. Okay? So, all right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about MyMathLab Plus. We're going to log in here in a minute. Okay? So again, this is where your homework and your quizzes are going to be done. And as I talked about, if you've unsuccessfully submitted an answer and you're convinced you're right, let me know right away. ASAP means as soon as possible. Okay? One of the key things is to make sure that you're using the right format of the number. Okay? So again, if it's asking you to round to hundreds and you've got it all the way out to single digits, then that's not going to be a right answer. MyMathLab Plus won't accept it, even though it may be technically correct. All right, so let me see if I can do some wizardry here and bring up Desire to Learn. Okay, so this will show you the way to get to this if you haven't. I'm going to go first of all to front range. It's always fun typing in public, so if I make a mistake, I can't say it's on purpose. Right, so here's the home page. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that we get into the, over on the right-hand side, the online tools. And I think if I hit the smartboard working right, I should be able to do this here. Okay, so you'll see the Desire to Learn link. Hey, so far so good. Let me log in. So.
And this is entirely for reference, but mind if I ask what your password is?
Sure, you can ask.
Okay.
It's not going to be an answer I give you, though.
Fair enough, fair enough. Had to try.
You got it? I had a boss who used to always say, if you don't ask, you don't get. Right? So never hurts to ask. Okay, so here's the Desire to Learn page. And you can see there's a variety of information, announcements, and the like. Okay. Now, this may not be set up for me, which will make it fun. I have a variety of classes in here, so I'm going to. So this takes us into the class we're in now. Okay, I've got a page of course help on the front page. Again, it gives you my email address and a variety of things that you can use. The Math Center, when the Math Center is open, the hour for the Math Center, if you have questions, you can go in there for free tutoring. Okay. Disability support services, there are a variety of things that are important here. Now, if you go to content, you'll see a couple of things. First of all, it has the syllabus. So you can select, make sure the syllabus is highlighted, and you can bring down an electronic copy of the syllabus if for some reason you lose your paper copy. All right? The other thing I mentioned just now about the offline homework for the syllabus hut. Bless you. Okay. Here is I went to the offline homework link, and you'll see there's a paper you can download, and you can just put your name and information on that, the answers on that, and then turn that in on the 29th. Again, remember that's due on the 29th. This is not managed via the MyMathLab Plus. Okay. All right, so now, and no, you can't have access to the grade book either, except your own grades. Yes?
That was my question.
Oh, that's your
no,
question?
I'm kidding. Man. Will that assignment be turned in online or?
No, I want you to turn in a hard copy. Hard copy. Turn it in the first of class on the 29th. All right, so now, back to the main page for the Desire to Learn. You can see the MyMathLab Plus is over here. Well, if all else fails.
There's a little thing that dropped down at the top.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Pop-ups. And of course, everyone that I tried to start is going to be coming on. So if you want to do this with every hand you've got, you know, with, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the opening screen for the MyMathLab Plus. All right? So there's a lot of information on here. The first thing you'll really notice is the calendar. Okay, this is going to be set up with the academic calendar. I've gone through and I've populated this with the due dates for the homework and the quizzes. So if you go through this, you're going to see a variety of little icons. Okay? This will tell you what's due, okay, on those dates. So this says homework for section 1.1 is due on Wednesday the 30th. the Chapter 1 quiz is going to be on that day as well. Okay? You can start any of these assignments anytime you like. There's nothing that prevents you to start early if you want to do that. Okay? It's just that you have a definite end date, and it's by midnight, I think it is, of that day that you've got to have those done. Okay. So it'll also kind of give you, now notice the offline homework is not on here. Okay, also the quizzes or the exams will not be on here, but certainly the homework and the quizzes are going to be showing. So that's going to tell you what's coming up next. So I'll keep you reminded of what's happening. So you can do this and look at all the assignments and see when these are all coming up, how much time you have. The only thing you have a time limit on are your quizzes. You get to take the quizzes twice. There's 2 hours for each quiz. A quiz should only take about an hour normally. So I think that the 2 hours should be sufficient. If that's not, let me know and we can work with you on that. But I think for everybody, that should be okay. All right? Because again, it should take less than an hour typically. There are no timelines on the homework. Okay, so you can take as long as you need to take on the homework. You can actually stop and save and come back to that material. Okay, so anyway, you get a good perspective of what's going on, what's coming up. Again, homework are the circles, the quizzes are the boxes. All right. So let's click on a homework assignment. We'll pick one. I've already started kind of fooling around with some of these so you can see. I've got some things here. We're going to pick on 2.2. Oh no, I want to go back. Bless you. Okay, so I clicked on it, okay, and it says, I went through and I worked on some things here. This told me how much I did. And the attempts are unlimited per question, so you can take as many questions times as you want to answer a question. Now the software is pretty smart. So if you try 3 times, I think it is, and you don't get the answer right on the 3 times, it's not going to let you try the 4th and the 5th, which you would think would be helpful for multiple choice questions. It's going to change the question on you, okay? But we'll show about the different ways you can work, okay? So here's a question that I worked already. Now I'm going to select try again, okay? Select the correct choice that completes the sentence below. So this is kind of like a multiple choice. So when you pick this, okay, 2 sets that contain the same element are called equal. We're going to try that. Now I'm going to do a check. Okay, and it says I got it right. All right. Now, if you want to, there are a variety of things you can do. Okay. You can go back up into this box and you can see all the problems that are here on this homework. Right, so you can see all the ones that you've gotten correct. Okay, similarly you can see all the ones that you've gotten wrong on it. We're going to pick another one. Okay, we're going to be talking about sets next week. Okay, or I'm sorry, next class. Oop, why did it do that? Okay, so here are my options. Okay, I can do another thing here. I can go to question help. Okay, I can bring up the textbook if I want to. Come on.
That pop-up thing.
Is pop-up locked again? Well, let's try again here. Okay. All right, hopefully you've gone through an updated Flash. We're going to forget that. So it does this book does require Flash for you to run it. Okay. And I will tell you, I've been fooling around with Firefox, Chrome, and Internet Explorer. Chrome has been kind of iffy for me. Firefox has been okay, and Internet Explorer has been okay. So your choice. also looked on my iPhone and my iPad, not so good, right? So if you want to try those, not necessarily so helpful. Okay, so here's where it brings up the relevant section that you can talk about what we're looking at in the sets. Okay. The other thing is, again, if you had a problem with this and you're convinced you got the right answer, you can send a note to me by asking my instructor. Okay. The other option you can do is print things out. You can print the single question, or you can print the entire set of questions on the homework. And again, my advice to you is that you select that option, you print the homework assignment right when you get into the homework, and you work it offline on paper. Okay? I know it's a little archaic to work on paper and pen, but I think you'll find out that that will be more helpful for you when you do that. Okay? All right. I'm going to pick a wrong answer. Okay? It not only tells me I'm wrong, but it tells me what the right answer is. Okay? So I can try again. Okay? Now in this case, okay, got it right. Now obviously that's helpful on multiple choice, but again, if you tried 2 or 3 times and you're not getting correct, it's going to change the question on you. All right? Let's see. There's also a way, and I'm trying to find that option here, it's not showing up again. You've got a help button that you can go down and see, bless you, how you can see different elements and how it's looking for. This tells you about how you look at the player to give you the final scores and things like that. But you can also work example problems. Okay, so let's go, we can look at question 6. Again, this is one that we got right, but if we had gotten it wrong, okay, we can go in. There should be another way here. Pardon me. Should show up. Typically it has a little box here that says a similar problem, but I'm not seeing that on this option. So I'm going to pick up. Okay, so another error. Now, it's saying the best score is 100%. I got 0, and I can tell, ask it which one I want to save. Okay. Obviously, you want to save the best score. All right. The thing to note too on these problems, there's a problem number up here at the top. You can use that to reference to go back in and look later on if you'd like. Okay. So with this one, that was, let me bring that one back up again. That was 216. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back over here to study plan. And the study plan, you should be able to get to the you click on all chapters, and you can go back to chapter 2. This was the sets, and we were on 2.1, set concepts, and we were 216 was the one we were working on, right? So there's 216. I can click. I can click. Any blockers. I'm sorry?
Is it opening in on the one you already?
Yeah, I was looking at it. I didn't see it down there, so. That's the one we're in. That's the homework problem itself, 216. So it's not opening up for some reason. I did not have that challenge before. Let's try starting over again. Okay, so it brings it back up to 216, and I can work through that one again. Okay, there's also a way on here to look for similar questions, so you can find out and work through similar problems to help you study that. Okay. Let's go look at a quiz. Okay. Now I've already started this one, but I'm going to start it again here. Okay. Again, it's the same kind of concept here. Okay. Fill in the blank. So you're going to have a multiple choice. There are going to be some. There are going to be actual answers where you have to enter a number in. Okay. Let's see what that tells us. Wow. This is going to be a great example as to how not to work in MyMathLab Plus. Right? All right, I'll have to talk to the IT about this. Okay. But again, you can take the quiz. You get 2 hours to work it, as I indicated. If you have to get up and leave while you're taking a quiz, the timer's going to keep going. Okay? So you need to make sure when you're getting ready to take a quiz that you start and you go continuously through that period. Otherwise, you're going to forfeit some of that time. Okay? Let me go back. It may not let me because I've already done the. Okay. I'm just going to pick. Let me go back. Start another quiz. Let's start that one. Okay, so again, it tells me when you've got this. Use your 2 hour timer. So it's a little bit before 9. So it's going to tell me a little bit before. Yeah, 9. Okay. So you got 120. You can start the test, and you go through and pick. You can select the answer that's the answer that you want to select, and then it'll give you an opportunity to do the submit answer. Okay? All right. I know that wasn't a very satisfying example of going through MyMathLab Plus, so I apologize. Well, you can go back to your course home, and this gives you an idea of how you're doing on the material so far. Okay, so this gives you an idea of your grade at this point in time. So you can see I'm doing really well. I got 11.25%. Okay. Yes, I can teach. I just can't take. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. It tells me when I submitted things, what my score was, so you can get a kind of a graph of how you're doing. It'll give you real feedback on what's going on. Now, one of the things to be aware of is that if you're doing your homework and you're only going to do, let's say tonight you want to do 1 problem, tomorrow you want to do 2 problems, and between tonight and tomorrow you look at your grade report here. It's going to go show you the current material. So it's going to assume you've only worked 1 homework problem, so it's going to say that's a low score, right? So don't panic until you've gone all the way through it and you've submitted. All right? So that gives you kind of a good overview of what you've accomplished. Okay? And again, if you want to look at material, you can actually bring up the textbook just by going through the e-text piece. And this brings you up through the full text. And you can go to the material, any particular chapter, and again, this is just like in the hard copy text. So everything's available for you there. Okay? So from a grade perspective, or from a MyMathLab perspective, you're going to be working assignments on this. You're going to be working your study plan, your grade book, and the e-text. Okay, so those are the different elements of MyMathLab. Any questions?
So the textbook is going to be integrated into MathLab Plus,
It is.
so we don't have to buy the textbook if we don't want to.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Once you pay for the $100 for the MyMathLab Plus, you get the electronic copy of the text, so you don't have to buy the hard copy. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So will we be using the book in class, like during lessons?
So I am going to be teaching from the book.
Okay.
Okay, in other words, I'm going to give you my notes, but unless we get into working additional problems, you're not going to see me really opening the textbook.
Okay, so that way if we do like the e-text, we don't have to bring in like our laptop for the book.
No, you don't have to bring in the text, right? I should be providing all material, and if we need to do something by looking online, we can look and bring up the text. Okay? Other questions? Okay, why don't we take a 10-minute break, and we'll start by 5 till on that clock right there. Okay. All right. If you have your index card and you don't know what to do with it, sign your first name that you'd like to be called, your last name, and something about yourself that's not private. Okay. And I'll collect these at the end of the class. Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you just gonna collect these, or are we gonna share them?
I'm just going to collect them.
Okay.
That's just for me as a memory technique.
Well, that's upsetting. No, I'm kidding.
But if you'd like to stand
No,
up
no.
before the class starts and share, you can do that.
Hey guys, just to let you know, I'm gonna put myself out there.
I'm sorry, no extra credit for that, though.
Well, I tried. So I have a question.
Yeah,
Heads up, I have a lot of questions.
no worries.
Certified question guy.
Oh, yeah. You'll ask the questions nobody else wants to ask, huh?
I guess, I don't know. Why math over any other subject?
Why math in the sense of what?
Why do you enjoy math, or what made you want to pursue math over anything else?
Well, I tell you that my degrees, I have several degrees, several advanced degrees, that are in math and computer science. And when I originally taught, several decades ago, I taught computer science classes. Okay, but math was always the foundation of that. It was just something that I always enjoyed doing, except for when my dad was trying to help me with my homework. You know, my dad, he always frustrated me to the point of tears. So, and I don't know if I did just to spite him, the fact that I could do it or not, but it's just been a subject I enjoy doing. I've always been kind of an engineering, technical kind of guy. A real tech geek, as you can tell by
Yeah.
my success on MyMathLab Plus.
My mind is binary. Okay, now that he's gone. No, I'm kidding. No.
Kevin Ron Alford. I'm teaching down in B 1404. I don't have an immediate crisis, but the current version of Flash is not loaded on this computer, and I was having difficulty selecting some of the options in MyMathLab Plus. I suspect it might be tied to Flash. Yeah, that would be good. Again, I think I can work around it now, but just want you guys to know. Yep. I appreciate it. Thanks. Okay.
Here's a question. Who here is good at math?
Is anybody ever really that good?
No,
at math?
like honestly, like I was thinking about that, like people in the class who are maybe not great at it, you know, but good at it, understand it well, versus those who aren't, you know.
I feel like that's a subjective question.
Yeah, okay.
It's all relative.
We'll come back to that.
Oh gosh.
Ask me again.
Yeah. Put a pin in it.
Who here's not good at math? Who here knows who is not good?
Not that anyone would care, but feel free to follow me on Insta. Just kidding, bro. I'll be that guy, don't worry. Also Snapchat. My son. No, I'm kidding. No. Okay, I'll stop. I'm done.
We got another minute or so, unless y'all want to go ahead and get it started. Everybody's ready? Okay. Okay, so I think it was Flash that was causing us a problem. You know, when I had to use the overversion of Flash, so they're going to come update that later. Okay, so section 1.1, inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. So when we complete this section, which will potentially be next time, you're going to understand and use inductive reasoning to solve some problems, and understand and use deductive reasoning to solve problems. Okay, so that's our goal in section 1.1. Okay, so what is inductive reasoning? Okay, it's a process of looking at a variety of specific cases and coming to a general conclusion. Okay, so your pictures is of birds. What conclusion do you have by looking at these pictures of birds as to the number of feet that the birds have? Two. Not a trick question. I'll try not to ask for a question. Okay, 2. Okay. Now, that reminds me of a joke. So a guy took a class in ornithology. And ornithology is the study of birds. Okay? So he was doing really well. I got to the final exam, and he had studied hours and hours and hours for his final exam. And he got into the final exam, and there were just a bunch of pictures of birds' feet. And the instructor, the exam was you had to be able to identify the bird by the bird's feet. Who would have thought to study that, right? So he looked at it and looked at it and looked at it, and after about 15 minutes he said, I can't do anything like that. So he went up to the professor, he turned in his exam, getting ready to leave, and the guy goes, the instructor goes, wait, you didn't put your name on the test. He goes, figure it out. Okay? All right. I won't do that again. All right, so you can conclude that they have 2 feet.
I like that.
Okay? Now, what conclusion do you have about birds? Come on. Let me see if I can get this.
You just put up a
Yeah, a screen. Didn't I?
yeah.
Okay, let's see if I can. Scroll bars down here. Already done this one.
Hit the red X.
Thank you.
Technology is amazing.
Okay. You don't get any extra credit for that either.
You know, I'm really trying.
I know you are. What conclusion do you have here about the birds being able to fly?
That they can.
That birds can fly, right?
Yeah.
Birds can fly.
Confirmed. So that's Nat Geo.
You know what this is? Penguin. Can penguins fly?
No.
No.
If you throw it hard.
So,
I'm sorry.
so you may have heard the phrase about jumping to conclusions. That's kind of based on the inductive reasoning approach, right? You're jumping to a conclusion. You've looked at some specific cases and you jump to a conclusion, something happens. Well, this is what's called a counterexample. Okay? It's something that basically disproves your conclusion. Okay?
Wait.
So, any questions about this from an inductive reasoning perspective?
No, I was under the assumption that the conclusion was that penguins couldn't fly. And then you said counterexample. I'm like,
Well,
you're
so
gonna tell me penguins can't
we kind of concluded from our original picture that birds could fly, right?
Right. Okay.
A penguin is a bird, a penguin cannot fly, and therefore birds can't, not all birds can fly. It's not a conclusion you can draw about birds. How about chickens? You know if chickens can fly? Have you heard that expression?
They can glide.
They can fly, not very far, but they can fly. Okay, you just don't typically see them. How about turkeys?
I don't know, I've been questioning that lately.
You've been,
By my apartment, we've got wild turkeys,
yeah?
and I came across one way up high on the electrical wire pole. No idea how he got up there.
As it turns out, wild turkeys can fly. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. It's domesticated turkeys, the ones that are kept in pens or free range or whatever. They're bred differently, so they aren't able to fly.
I
Okay?
found out peacocks can fly, just like months ago.
Yeah.
Didn't know they could.
Huh.
And we went to the zoo and saw one. I was like, okay.
So what examples can you come up with of some inductive reasoning? Give me some specific cases and then tell me a conclusion
Thinking
that
about those birds.
come up with inductive reasoning. Similar to what I did with the birds.
Oh, jeez.
Would all cars can drive because they have wheels, or they can move because they have wheels? Would that be a good example?
Well, it's an example. I'll tell you, I also like to collect old cars. I had a 59 Willis, and I don't know if anybody knows about that. It's an old Jeep. It sat in my garage for 25 years without moving. And if you can go drive around some of the countryside, you see a lot of cars out. But on the surface, you'd think that all cars could drive, right?
Yeah.
But not all cars can, unfortunately. speaking from personal experience. Okay?
You could say also, okay, majority of adults have driver's licenses. That doesn't guarantee that all adults can drive.
The majority of adults have driver's licenses. Okay? All right?
All fruit has,
I'm sorry?
all fruit have seeds in them, but then the counterexample would be the tomato.
The tomato?
May not have seeds.
Well, tomatoes got
It
seeds
doesn't
on
have
it.
seeds.
Well, but is it a fruit?
Well, there's
Different
there's the debate. Yeah, I've heard it both ways. Is a tomato a vegetable or fruit? Okay. All right. Now, are there any examples? Even bananas have seeds. Okay.
Really?
Okay. Apples. You know, if you cut a banana horizontally, you can see the little circles inside. Can you imagine trying to pick those seeds to plant them? I don't know how they do that. Other examples? I don't think I have anything hidden here. Okay, so let's talk about some common definitions in math. Okay, natural numbers are the numbers that are counting numbers. Okay, I don't know if you've heard that expression before. They start with the number 1, because 0 isn't a counting number, right? I have 0 things, I'm not counting 0. I don't start my counting of the number of pins on the board here at 0. Okay. Start with 1, and they go up by 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, right? These are the numbers used in counting. Now, see these little dots at the end, the 3 dots, okay, the 3 periods? Those are called ellipses. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the next section as well, okay? What that means is this sequence continues in the same pattern. You can tell me what the next number is, right?
6.
6, right? Because you see each of these increases by 1. If I pick the natural number 2001, what's the next number in the sequence? 2002, right? Okay? They continue in that same pattern. There's a pattern associated with it. Okay? Now, some numbers are divisible, meaning they can be divided by another number with a remainder of 0. Okay? So, even numbers are divisible by 2, right? If you divide them by 2, let's see if I can do this great math there. Come on. Where's my... Okay, if I divide 4 by 2, I'm going to get the number 2, and the remainder is 0. Okay? So, that's another set of definitions. Okay, what about if we have 2 odd numbers multiplied by together? Is the result an odd number?
No.
No? Okay.
Wait. Yes.
What does 3 times 3 equal?
9.
9? Odd number? Odd times odd?
5.
Odd number?
I was wrong. I'll take that out.
25? Okay. So, now we can make a trend of this, and we'll do some math later on that shows why that's true. But we can, from an inductive reasoning perspective, induce that if we look at these examples, okay, that an odd number multiplied by an odd number is going to be an odd number. Okay, if we add an odd number and an even number, what will the result be, odd or even? I'm hearing countering opinions here. Okay, so we're going to take, what?
We're gonna copy
I got to
and
remember to
paste.
do that. We're going to take 3 plus 4, and what does that equal?
What?
I thought we were multiplying. Oh, added.
Oh, okay.
An odd number
I can't read.
and an even number are added together. Okay?
Yeah. Never mind. Yeah.
That's an odd number.
Mhm.
Okay? Oh, wrong one. Now I have to remember how to do this. Okay, and we can keep working problems like that, and from those examples, those specific examples, we can deduce that an odd number plus an even number equal an odd number. Okay? Those are some mathematical examples. Okay. Page 3 of your text, when you get it, talks about retina scanners and modern identification techniques. If you've ever watched CSI, Las Vegas, or whatever, one of those shows, or you see any crime show, they're always talking about DNA, right? What's DNA? Well, it's a part of our body, it's a chemical part of our body that's unique to every individual. At least we believe it's unique to every individual. And we've got millions and millions of cases of people of DNA recorded that no two have been found alike. Now, obviously, there's some similarities. Have you ever seen any show where they talk about, bless you, where they talk about, well, gosh, this person is related to that other person through the DNA? Because there's some common elements to DNA, but they're always specific to an individual. I'm trying to remember one of the latest Marvel flicks, or one of the other superhero flicks, where they go in, they scan the retina. You see them, they go up to a wall and it does a little red thing, you know, and that lets them in the room.
It's like every spy movie ever.
I'm sorry?
So that's like every spy movie ever.
Every spy movie ever, right? Okay. Well, the idea is that the pattern of your blood vessels on your retina is unique to every person.
The Avengers.
Okay?
First time.
All right. It's based on inductive reasoning. But I'll let you know that there were some unique things about this. Okay? As I indicate up here, I used to work at a government facility that before you went into the facility, you came up to a turnstile. You walked into the turnstile, you scanned your retina, and they weighed you. Okay? And if your retina scan matched and your weight was logged, then you could leave and go into the building. Okay, at the end of the day, you came out to that turnstile, they would scan your retina. If your retina matched, and if your weight matched, you could leave.
Wait.
Yeah, what if you lost a bunch of weight?
Well, it's in a day, right? In the course of a day.
Yeah.
Is
Well-
it like variance? Because, you know, you could like
You
go to the
eat.
bathroom and lose
Yeah.
a couple pounds.
Well, as it turns out, there's a couple different things, okay? Especially for women, when women are pregnant, their retinas change. The blood vessel pattern in their eyes change. So typically, that was how they alerted people, women, that they were pregnant, okay? Because they would go up and they couldn't get through the scanner even though they had been in the system, okay? So not quite a good deduction.
And one guy in the back is like, what?
The other problem was, I came into work with my lunch pail and my coat. I leave my coat in the office, I eat my lunch, and I walk out, and all I have is an empty lunch pail and no coat. Weight doesn't match, right? So alarms would go off, and people with guns would come and see what was going on. That facility no longer has retina scanners or weight scanners, okay? So you always have to be careful about some of these things, but again, most of the modern identification techniques are based on inductive reasoning. Okay, so again, induction involves looking at a pattern and predicting a conclusion. It's like we looked at the birds with their feet, we looked at the birds with wings, okay, in flight, okay? And it's a pretty common tool that mathematicians and others use in solving problems, okay? It's part of something called the scientific method, okay? So when you predict something based on your observation, specific observation, that's called a hypothesis or a conjecture. My 3-year-old grandson came to us the other day and he calls me Papo. Papo, I have a hypothesis. Wow, what's your hypothesis, Ari? If I freeze water, it'll turn into ice. Okay, so let's try it. So we got some water, we put it in the freezer, and sure enough, it turned into ice. Right? You do that enough times, you can make a conclusion out of that, right? He deduced, he had an hypothesis about water turning into ice if it's frozen, okay? And he was able to bear that out. We've done that experiment a number of times just to make sure that the water does turn into ice, okay? So, inductive reasoning, scientific method. Okay, so we talked about, again, the example from page 3 of the text. Okay, example 3, that was that human characteristics. Right? So what reasoning process do you think was used to conclude that no two people have the same fingerprints or DNA? There's a hint. We've been talking about it. Inductive reasoning, right? Based on the fact that they've studied millions and millions of samples of fingerprints and DNA. And as a result of that, those two pieces of evidence are used in law, courts of law, to convict. Okay? So again, it was an inductive reasoning. They had a hypothesis. It's been borne out over time. Okay? Because nobody has been able to show that my DNA is the same as somebody else's DNA. Now there's people that use acid to get rid of their fingerprints and stuff like that. That's a little bit of an aberration, but still, this is what we're talking about and how this is being used. How do you think you can use inductive reasoning in your life? Instructors with beards are really cool instructors.
Well, no, I'm kidding. No. They're awesome.
Okay. Well, maybe not. Maybe there's some jerks among us. I'll tell you, when I was in grad school, I had an instructor who was giving exams, and he said, this exam is going to be scheduled on this day, which also happened to be due the date of one of my child's due date. And so I asked him, I said, I have a potential problem. If my wife gives birth, I'm going to miss the class, miss the exam. Can we do something in terms of makeup? He says, well, the course is offered again next year. I went home and I begged and I pleaded, don't do it on that date. She gave birth during spring break, so I was good. Okay. So there are things that you can conclude, right? My wife used to always be frustrated with me because we had a certain car that my goal was to get as much gas in the tank as I could every time we filled up, which meant I had to drive it as long as I could to get it as close to really empty as I could. Okay? She was convinced I was going to run out of gas in that car. I never did. But in a 12-gallon tank, I got 12.5 gallons, 12.6 gallons, 12.2 gallons. Okay? Was I using inductive reasoning there?
No.
No?
I mean, if you already know how much the car would take, I'm not a car person, but if
Sure.
you know how much the tank can hold, and obviously you're good at math, I think you can find a pretty good number
Sure.
low enough for you to be safe.
Sure. But when that gets to be really my wife was really convinced. Well, I did conclude after a lot of experiments, and I mean a lot of experiments, that I could drive it well past when that needle got down to a certain point. Okay? You may decide, okay, I can always get right up to the last date to pay my classes for tuition. Okay, you may do that continually. So maybe you could induce or have a hypothesis that you're never going to have a problem if you make it right up to the last day. Okay? So there are a lot of different ways that you use this that you may not consciously know that you're using this principle in your work. Okay, divisibility by 4. So here's a conjecture. If the last two digits of a number form a number which is divisible by 4, then the number itself is divisible by 4. Okay? Give me some examples. What's an example of a number that the last digit is divisible by 4? And 4 doesn't count.
24.
I'm sorry?
24.
24? Okay. So I'm going to divide 24 by 4, and what's the answer? 6. Okay. Is that divisible by 4? Not evenly divisible by 4. Okay? What's another example?
16.
I'm sorry?
16.
16?
Yeah.
Okay, 16 divided by 4 is 4, so that works. Okay. What was it? 20?
No. What?
20 divided by 4 is 5.
I said wait. You got 20. Language is amazing.
It is amazing, isn't it? I may be slow, but I make a lot of mistakes.
That's fine.
Okay? All right, so we could say that conclusion wasn't necessarily true. Okay? Now, I got some questions for you. Which is heavier, a ton of rocks or a ton of feathers? They're the same.
This
Okay.
video I saw of a guy that asked that question, and someone comes to him. He goes, "Which is heavier, a ton of feathers or a ton of rocks?" And he goes, "The answer is a ton of rocks because rocks are heavier than feathers." This guy comes to him and tells him, "No, they're the same thing." He goes, "No, it's
Yeah, they're a
not
ton,
the same thing."
which is a
Then
ton, right?
Another person comes and he goes, "No, he's serious. They weigh the same thing." And he looks at the camera and just looks devastated.
All right, so if I drop a ton of feathers and a ton of rocks from the same height on Earth, which is going to hit Earth first? The rocks are. Okay? What if I take them to the moon? Which is going to land first? The rocks or the feather? I'm sorry? Neither. They're going to land at the same time. Actually, there was an astronaut that did that experiment. He took a hammer, he took a feather, and he dropped it on the moon, and sure enough, they landed at the same time. Do y'all know why?
Gravity is acting the same on.
No wind resistance.
Gravity is the same on both, but what's different in the Earth versus what's different in the moon? Atmosphere, right? There's no atmosphere really to speak of on the moon, so there was no friction getting in the way of those feathers from falling, okay? So, could we conclude that rocks and feathers, a ton of each, would fall at the same time if we just did a bunch of observations on Earth?
If it was on Earth.
I'm sorry?
If it was on Earth.
If it was on Earth,
Yeah.
we could make the conclusion that the rocks are going to drop first. Something heavier is going to drop first, maybe. Maybe it's not something that's necessarily heavier. It could be the same shape, right? So there are a lot of different parables, different parameters there. But again, you always have to be careful about your conclusions and looking at the examples that you have. You always want to see if you can find a counterexample, because counterexamples are important to be able to verify if you've got a valid induction or not. Okay? Now, we've talked about inductive reasoning. That was the case of looking at a bunch of specific examples and getting to a conclusion. Now we're going to talk about deductive reasoning. Okay? And this is the process of reasoning to a specific conclusion from a general statement. So it's kind of the inverse. Okay? All right, so general, specific. So inductive, we're going to go from general things to a specific conclusion. In the deductive, we're going to go from the specific to the general. Okay, so pick a number, any number. Okay, pick a number, multiply the number by 4, add 2 to the product, divide the sum by 2, and subtract 1 from the quotient. Okay, so let's do this a couple of times and see what happens. Give me a number.
99.
99? Now you're going to make my math really hard. Okay. Okay, we're going to multiply it by 4. Okay, so that's 36, 40. Everybody all right with that number? Okay. Now we're going to add 2 to the product. We're going to get 408. Now we're going to divide this by 2. 204. Okay. And then we're going to subtract 1 from it. Okay. What's the relationship between those two numbers? Kind of hard to tell right now, right? I'm sorry?
They're both odd numbers.
They're both odd numbers. Okay. Let's pick another number. Let's pick something maybe a little bit easier. We're gonna take 4, 16, okay, so that's 24, 64. We're gonna add 2, that takes us to 66. We're gonna divide it by 2, that's 33, and then we're gonna subtract 2.
You're gonna hate me. I'm gonna be that person, but
I made a
first-
mistake, didn't
yeah,
I?
you did.
Thank you. All right. Where did I make my mistake?
You added. Okay, the way that I'm thinking is kind of hard to explain, but
Okay.
9 times 4 equals 36.
Uh-huh.
So you bring up the 3.
It's 30, it should be
And-
396, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be 36 plus 3, and that would equal 39, not 40.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna do that on occasion, sometimes on purpose and sometimes by accident, okay? So, way to pay attention, that's what I'm looking for from a participation perspective, okay? So I'm gonna carry my 3, 4 times that's 36. So 396, let me erase. Okay, I'm gonna add 2, 398. I'm gonna divide it by 2, that's 199. I'm gonna subtract 1, that's 198. Okay? Let's pick another number. What's another number? Give me a number.
27.
It's gotta be
Just kidding. I'm done.
any number, 27.
Just kidding. I'm not.
Okay? All right? I get that right? Okay? I'm going to add 2. That takes me to 110. I'm going to divide it by 2. It's going to take me to 55. And I'm going to subtract 1. Okay, what's the conclusion you can draw from this mathematical experiment?
They always end in even numbers.
I'm sorry?
They're always even numbers.
They're always even numbers.
Process
The last
doubles
number?
the original.
I'm sorry?
The last number is always even.
The last number's always even? Okay.
The end number is half of the beginning number.
Okay, so this number's twice this number, or this number's half of this number. Okay? So, we can make a conjecture about that relationship. Okay? All right, let's do some additional problems here. Yeah. Question?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
No worries. We're making really good time. Okay. Okay, remember what the counting numbers were? What do we call, what's another name for those? Natural numbers? Okay, all right. Let's do this. Okay, let's say we have, we're going to add 2 numbers, and it has a remainder of 0. Okay. Then what's the relationship between A and B? I'm sorry, that's not plus. I'm not plus, that's... divided by. What's the relationship between A and B? Divisible, all right? Okay, A is divisible by B if the remainder is 0. Okay, all right. Let's see. Who can tell me what inductive reasoning is?
Using a pattern to come to a conclusion.
Okay, use a pattern to come to a conclusion. Okay, you look at a bunch of different things and you come up with a conclusion. How about deductive reasoning?
General reasoning turns into specifics.
Okay, you go from a conclusion, if you will, a general approach or general view, and you go to specific examples. Remember here, okay, we went from conclusion, well, we took some specific examples and came to a conclusion. We could have said our conclusion was that if we do all these things, that this number is going to be half of the result, and then we could have worked backwards to see the answers. Okay, so that would be an example of deductive reasoning, or this could be both. depending on how we deal with that. Okay? All right. Let's see. I apologize, I thought this was on the ringer. All right. Okay, let's look at some patterns. What's the next number? 11. How did you come to that conclusion?
We're listing odds in numerical order.
They're odds in numerical order. Or you could say we started with 1 and we added 2 to each one. Okay? What's the next one? 9,999. Okay, and how did we come to that conclusion?
You just kept adding a 9 every time. No, wait, technically.
Okay, we basically added a digit, we repeated the digit one more time with each iteration of the number. Inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning?
90.
Inductive, okay? And how did we do that? How did we decide it was inductive reasoning? Follows a pattern, right? So we looked at some examples, the 9, the 99, the 999, okay? And we deduced that for each successive number, we were going to add another digit.
Yeah.
Okay?
First resonance.
All right?
One of those,
Okay. Let's see.
raffle.
What's the next number?
30s.
Well, first of all, let's go with this. What's the pattern that we have here?
Multiplying by 2.
Multiplying by 2? Well, that works from there to there.
Multiply it by itself.
It's exponential,
It's an exponential, right? Or multiply it by itself.
so it's not 30.
So what's the answer here? 16 times 16, right? And what's that result going to be? Well, it's whatever the math is going to be, right? 196.
196.
Okay?
256.
All right. So, I'm sorry?
I got 256.
256?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
That's all right. I'm glad.
She's calling you out, man.
She is. That's okay.
She goes.
All right, so we're going to do this with a long hand. So that's 36, carry the 3, and 1 times 6 is 6. No, that's not right either, is it?
256.
256.
I have a calculator, so.
Do you have an approved calculator?
Oh, got him.
All right.
I have a calculator style.
16 times 16.
I like this class.
You like it? I told you we're going to be practical here, right? That was 96. And then we have, okay. Doing math in public is always fun.
Yeah.
I like typing in public.
Now, you know me, I'm a stickler for extra credit. I'm just saying. There's some extra credit.
Well, have fun with that one. Okay, all right. Let's see. What are some other examples we can come up with for inductive reasoning? Let's think something about the class here. What's the relationship
Glasses.
between students and S numbers?
Wait, what?
We each have one.
We each have one,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And they're unique, right? So if we have a new student add to class, are they going to have an S number?
Yeah.
Okay. What if we expanded this and say all the people in this room?
Even you have.
Even I have an S number, right? So if I have another teacher come into this room, are they going to have an S number?
Yep.
Okay.
You can ask.
So what is that, inductive or deductive reasoning?
That's in.
To be deductive.
That's
So
right.
again, remember inductive, you're going from specific
Yeah.
examples to a general conclusion.
Mhm.
Deductive, you're going from a general conclusion to specific examples, in effect, okay? So you probably skipped a few steps in your head when you were thinking about this. What were those specific examples that you were, or steps that you were skipping? Well, you were thinking through that when I enrolled, I got an S number. And that's probably true for everybody. So you use the examples that everybody had an S number, and as a result of that, they got to, everybody has an S number. So that was your general conclusion by looking at the examples. Well, let's think about, how about, could we turn that around and do a deduction on that? Do a
Yeah.
deductive approach? Remember, a deductive approach is that you go from the general to the specific, right? Right?
I suppose because we just kept expanding. If we're was it conductive? You said that's the term.
Deductive.
Deductive. My
Right.
apologies. We could say all faculty in the school have S numbers.
Okay? That would be your
But-
general.
Yeah. That's your
Conclusion,
general
okay.
conclusion.
And so, how would you go about making an example? Yes, ma'am.
So would the difference be, like the deductive would be everybody has an S number because you have one, they have one. And that would be the deductive, and then the inductive would be they have one, you have one, therefore everybody has an S number. Is
Right.
that the difference?
That's in effect the difference. For the inductive says, you have an S number, I have an S number, you have an S number, and as a result, everybody has an S number.
You get this.
Okay? The deductive is the flip side of that, okay? The policy at front range is for people to have S numbers, so that means you have one, you have one, you have one. Okay? Did you have a question?
I was gonna say something similar.
Okay, okay. So see the difference? Now, obviously, we're using the same example to go both ways. Okay? Remember the story about Isaac Newton and the apple? Okay? What happened? He was snoring and then he got rudely awoken, right? An apple fell on his head. What came out of that?
Calculus.
A worm.
A worm.
Newton's law.
A worm that was originally up there that was down on
Yeah.
there. Okay? What Newton's law, he talks about gravity, right?
Yeah.
Okay? What do you think, what process do you think he went through to come up with the law of gravity?
Deductive.
Deductive reasoning, okay? So, how so? Tell me how you think that might have happened.
He took kind of a general conclusion and broke it down into a concept,
Okay?
into specific.
Things fall,
Yeah.
right? And so from that things fall, he started looking at things falling, okay? And concluded that everything is gonna fall, okay? And that's driven by some force. Okay? So that's the example of deductive reasoning.
So just like
Okay. All right, let's see.
Does it just happen, right?
Make sure I have the right one picked here. What's the next object gonna be? Triangle, right?
Theta.
Because you took this and you looked at those specific examples and you came up with that conclusion that you're gonna have a repeating pattern here, okay? Let's see, what would be an example of a deductive one using a pattern? Let's see. Pretty simple one. Okay? What are you going to do from a specific example perspective? Is that a rectangle? No. So we can't count that. Okay? Is that a rectangle?
Wait.
According to that statement, it is.
It is a rectangle,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
It's just a special case of a rectangle, right? It's a parallelogram. Okay? Rectangle? Okay? Can you think of any counterexample to this?
The square.
A square? I'll see if I can draw my perfect square here. Is a square a rectangle?
Yes.
It is a rectangle, okay? So, it looked different than these, and so it would lead you to believe maybe he's not, but it has 4 sides, okay? So, we went from a general statement to specifics, okay? Again, deductive reasoning. All right. Any questions?
What is that statement? It's like all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, all squares are rectangles, no matter how big I draw that. But this is a rectangle, but it's not a square. Okay? All right. Okay. Well, we have gone really fast, so I'm going to break with tradition. This will be an exception, I'm sure. Any questions on any of the material on MyMathLab Plus or any of the other things that we have?
Kind of just you work through it. Don't feel for it as well.
How do you get a hold of me if you need any help? Email? Try if you might. Okay, so what I'd like to do is collect your index cards on your way out. And I'll come back to you. We'll see you on Thursday morning. Thanks. Good idea what you're telling me about. You want to hang around and oh, okay. All right, thanks. Thanks. Okay. All right, thank you.
So you may have gotten an email.
I did.
Okay, I just wanted to introduce myself so
Okay,
you knew
thank
who I
you.
was.
All right, thank
Okay.
So, I think, I don't know what you heard about the quizzes on MyMathLab. I think it should be fine in terms of
Oh
what you're
yeah,
asking for.
I think that I would just like to do like the exams in the testing center. That's really it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do.
Okay, I just wanted to introduce myself so you knew who I was.
I appreciate that very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Similar.
Okay. Okay.
She got the email from the facilities, from Epworth and Berry,
Okay.
so I used just my testing center.
So we'll do that, and so when we get ready for the exam time, I'll send the exam to the testing center, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Yeah, I'll just schedule it for myself.
And I think from a class perspective, obviously, we'll watch for your can make it on, but, you know, in terms of testing and all that, and quizzes, you should be okay, I think.
And then, did you do the quizzes in class?
No, the quizzes are online. They're all online, and you get 2 hours for the quiz.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay? All right, thank you.
Professor, so the MATLAB